This episode is sponsored by The Alcohol Experiment, a free 30-day challenge designed to interrupt your patterns, give you control, restore your health, and put you back in touch with the version of you who doesn't need alcohol to cope, relax, or enjoy life. More than 220,000 people have already tried The Alcohol Experiment for themselves and have seen improved sleep, increased happiness, reduced anxiety, and so much more. Join thousands in this inspiring, hopeful, and exciting program where you examine your beliefs and reconnect with the best version of you without ever feeling like you're missing out. Start today for free at alcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And I'm here with Darren. Welcome, Darren. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. How are you? Yeah,
I'm doing good.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Glad to have you. So why don't you sort of take us back to, the beginnings of your drinking journey, where it all started for you?
Yeah, sure. I think with me, as with many others, it was kind of normalized in my youth. I saw my dad went to the pub religiously, and I mean religiously, every Saturday. He didn't drink every day, but you knew as soon as it was that time for him to walk out the door, that was it, and off he would go. And I think it became normalized. My mum hated drinking, and they would argue when he came in, and you would kind of think that would put you off. But having two older brothers as well, it just became normalized. So I was drinking, by the time I was 13, 14, 15, I was going into the pubs. Not saying I had a beard or anything like that, but I was, I could get served anyway. So, and it started early, I guess. And then as I got older into my teens, I was always the one that was, I wanted to drink to get drunk. I wanted to get hammered, and I thought that's what was having a good time. From there, it kind of just continued. Then I got into a role, into a sales and business development role, where I was traveling a lot, and I can remember going out with the guy who was kind of a mentor at one point, and he says, "Come on, we're going to go visit a customer," and yada yada, and off we went to visit the customer. And this was in the morning. He said, "Oh, we'll go out for lunch," and he bought me a pint. And I'm thinking, well, it's lunchtime, what's all this about? I was about 20 at the time. I thought, this is all right. Someone else is paying as well, and I'm drinking at work. Happy days. And there was something in me just thought, well, this is the way to go, And so started my career in sales, as it were. So traveling here and everywhere, it quickly became, the thing that I would be going to see customers, but straight away up here, I'm thinking, what's the nightlife like? What can I be doing? Where can I get a drink and things like that? And that went on for a number of years. And I think in 2006 was a particularly emotional roller coaster of a year. And I put that, quite firmly, I guess, in my story, because it was a period where I didn't deal with emotions, and it led to me drinking further. And that was the death of my mum. I got married, we had kids, and I had university exams. It was all happening in that year, but I just carried on. And as my career developed, I moved up and went to different companies, traveling and whatnot. And it would always be, get to the hotel, forget checking in. I was at the bar, and then I would check in, and then I would go up to the room or perhaps back to the bar, and it continued. And gradually, I'd always had a drink problem way before I admitted it, and I think a lot of people will be the same. But it eventually got where it just took over my life, and I was traveling, getting up on a Monday morning at 4 o'clock, stupid o'clock, whatever you want to call it, and I would be getting on an airplane in the lounge. You know, it's free to drink.
Yeah.
Traveling across Europe, I would end up in Germany, and you know, have a week's work. But of course, I was away from home, so I was just on it all the time. You know, I've given presentations for, you know, quite a lot of money, and to secure business contracts, and forgotten I'd done them, and things like that the next day. Thankfully, that particular one, I don't know how we won it, but so it's and it just got worse, you know. And I was traveling all the time, and it, I think that in itself is quite a common thing. Maybe not to the extent that I was drinking, but certainly people who do that, it's, you know, I look back and think, well, that's a single man's game, and it's, or a single woman's game, and I'm so privileged and pleased to be able to look back and say I got through that, and I've still got my family intact.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. I know I
it's,
feel the same way.
yeah, I am, but honestly, I'm so grateful for that. But it came to a head really in 2014, where, well, it was a crazy year anyway. I mean, I once woke up in Vienna and I'm thinking, where am I? I didn't know where I was, and I'd flown from the UK to Germany, had the afternoon in Germany, and then got on the plane to go and have a meeting the next day. But I totally just thinking, where am I? I mean, how do you forget? I mean, it's such a beautiful city. I didn't see any of it. And I just, well, I maybe did. I just couldn't remember. And I thought, that's crazy. That is really not right.
Wow.
And it got to a situation where I was either going to burn out, you know, go absolutely stir crazy, or get divorced, or, and it was, yeah, it led me to breakdown, to be honest. And to save everything, I just had to stop that lifestyle and that job. So that was 2014, and then I came back, took some time off work and everything, and carried on drinking, which was bizarre. So I cut out the traveling lifestyle, but the drinking persisted, and it was then that it really, you know, it really took a hold, and it started to control my life more. Although it was already doing that, but now it was more apparent, and because I was at home all the time, it was visible to, you know, to my loved ones, and my wife was seeing, you know, what's going on here. And then of course the secret drinking starts, doesn't it? Because you don't want people to know, and so, you know, that period up until me quitting for good, which was at the start of 2019, was up, down, stop, start, a month off, 2 months off, fall back on the wagon, off the wagon. You know, it really did. You know, looking back now, the lessons I learned from that is profound. But yeah, that 4-year period, some of the scrapes that I got into, because obviously I got another job, but similar things, you know, getting on trains and missing stops, and how I kept the job, I've no idea, but I somehow did. So I guess I was maybe, you know, functioning at the same time. But yeah, and after too many events that I look back and think, you know, how are you still alive? Yeah, it made me really take stock and quit. The last occasion, actually, sorry, I hope I'm not going on too much, but
No, this is
the
great.
last
Yeah.
occasion was at a works event. I was on a course. It was a management course that I was on, and we had to go down from Manchester to London, which is about a 2-hour train journey. And I'd stopped I'd been off it for 3 months, but the trigger for me was being away, because I thought, right, well, I'm away from home. Nobody knows. I can, you know, get bottles of wine in the room and whatever. And I got on the train, and I conveniently booked myself a first class ticket, because I knew that I could get drinks for free and, try and hide the fact, to be honest with you. But I'd had far too much when I got there and got, well, I wasn't allowed into the event, and there were CEOs and, all these people in really big trousers that if they noticed you're going to get fired. But luckily, well, depends how you look at it, my boss saw and he got summoned across, and that was it. I was poured into a taxi and sent on my merry way back up to Manchester, which was the last and final time I had a drink. So yeah, and I've never looked
And
back,
so
to be honest.
what was it? Just the embarrassment of your boss, or like what was the
No, I think
combination?
it was more letting my family down. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Well, it definitely was anyway. Because the next day, well, there'd been various incidents before that where, I got myself in a state, and my wife was very much like my mum. She doesn't like drinking too much. She has the occasional glass of wine, but it's like one, and she can stop. She's one of those very, I don't know what the word is, lucky, intelligent. I don't know, but she basically doesn't. She don't go over the top, which is very much like my parents were. To be fair, but it was definitely them, because I'd sent lots of texts off my phone, and it was clear, that I was absolutely paralytic. And that feeling that she had, was quite clear, and I could hear it in her voice and see it, and the fact that I knew that I'd done so well, since the New Year's Eve of 2018, I hadn't touched anything, and I didn't want to. And that final thing in my brain, I can remember thinking, well, you've done 3 months, let's test it out. I mean, what kind of, I don't know what the hell possessed me to think, well, it's your final test. I'd had hundreds of tests before and realised. But yeah, I did, and it didn't end well. And in that moment, even on the way back up, I can remember thinking, what you done? Why? And the next day, it was, I don't know, it was just like a switch. And it was almost like, that's it, you'll never drink again, son. Absolutely never. And it wasn't just that, it was I didn't want to. And I think that's a clear, there's something in that with, wanting to, needing to, or having to. I think you maybe have to, you maybe need to, but unless you want to, then it's probably not going to happen. And that was a key. Yeah, it was key, that, but it was a multitude of events for me, and it all kind of stacked up until it got to a point, and it was like, boom, that's it, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's so profoundly true. Like, you may need to, everybody may be screaming at you, your body may be screaming at you, your family may be screaming at you, but unless you want to, unless it's something inside you that is driving the change or making the decision, it's not going to matter. So the question is, how do you get that something inside you to want it, when all you want to do is just carry on?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, it was dealing with things that I'd locked away, and I didn't realise that this was affecting me, because I went through. Well, I saw quite a few counsellors through anxiety, and when I had the breakdown with leaving the job and everything like that, I saw counsellors, and it was quite clear, as soon as I started doing that I'd not dealt with issues of my mum. And that whole year, that was 2006, was just kind of all this, things bang together, just stick that away to one side, carry on, and it doesn't help. I mean, I went to, a friend of mine actually took me to a local I forget it was called Step Forward or something like that, but I think it was like a council or a government thing. And I went in and I just thought, no way, this isn't for me. I've been to a counsellor where I've come out and immediately downed a bottle of wine because I thought that didn't do any good. What's the point, you know? And I want till I found the rapport with somebody and went through the NLP and everything to change my thought process, that it really kicked in. I also did, what is that, 4 months with AA, did online meetings, but that ended purely because, I'll never forget some of the main things with AA. I took some really, really good lessons from there, particularly about taking personal inventory and things like that. But again, it wasn't for me. I had quite an experience in in Denmark with my sponsor, and yeah, I kind of took everything, all these lessons learned.
Are you happy to share?
Well, I am, yeah, yeah. Well, it was, AA has a stigma, rightly or wrongly, and it's all about religion, and you have to believe in God, which isn't necessarily true. Like I say, you know, I've took a lot. I've got utmost respect for AA, but I did online. I don't know. There's these online meetings that you can do. Very much, from what I can gather, the same as a meeting where you go into it and, you know, you sit around and whatever. Everybody's introduced, and yeah, it's the same. The difference being that your sponsor really can be from anywhere. So I hooked up with this guy. I won't say him by name, but in my book I refer to him as M. And he was a real nice guy, you know, and he still is a nice guy. But it was a case of going through the steps, and everything was on Skype, and it was all good, and I was quite happy. And, you know, I knew he was really religious. It was God's way or no way, which kind of rang alarm bells with me, because I thought, well, that's great if you want to believe or don't believe or whatever. That's up to you. And we did the steps, went through step 4, but step 5 where you share, and you tell somebody. He says, well, why don't we get together? And we was going to do it in London when he was traveling, but that got cancelled. And I thought Ryanair flights were £29 or 29, which is, what's that, $35 or something like that, to Denmark. And I ummed and ahed, because by this stage I'd been stopped a while, and I really had got to where I didn't want to travel anywhere. I'd found my sober bubble. I didn't want to be anywhere else really. But anyway, I went, and I was quite apprehensive, because the talk about, you know, you've got to turn it over to God and things like that was quite prominent and coming out more and more. And I went across there, and he says, right, okay, we'll get straight into it. And there was no, you know, introductions or anything like that as such. It was like, right, I found this place. We're going to go to this this place in the city. And in my mind, I'm thinking, my God, this guy's a serial killer. What's going on here? I don't know what to expect. And and where this place was, it turns out it was an old chapel where him and his family used to go and worship and things like that. And I thought, oh, right, okay, this is fine. And don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against anybody that's religious at all. That's each to their own. But we walked in, and it says, right, there's some rules. The first rule was, you can't ring home. You need to be fully focused, which I get, you need to be focused, but I'd got my comfort blanket in my phone knowing that my wife was on the other end. The second one was, we go right through, so no sleep. Bearing in mind this was about 7 o'clock in the evening. And the third one, there was 4 actually. What was the fourth? But the third one, the one that sticks in my mind, is if I wanted to go to the toilet, I couldn't wash my hands. And he would go, don't. And I'm like, what? I said, what if I want, like, what if it's not just a number one, I want number two? It's like, no. And I'm thinking, oh no, it's got to be a cult. It's got to be. This isn't AA. This is something different. And so, yeah, it kind of went like that. And we did the steps all the way through the night. But it was really intense, and we went through 7 and 8 and things like that. And he was, Neil, ask for forgiveness. And it was really like a baptism of fire. It was crazy. It really was crazy. I'd have to, well, reliving it is just, it's like something out of a film, to be honest. It really was. But the things I learned from that guy, all that aside, were just immense for me personally, and for that I'll never forget that. But yeah, it was certainly, when you've got thoughts of cults and serial killers and are you in safe hands and things like that. I mean, one was you need to see a manifestation things. And I'm like, well, perhaps I don't. And at one point I got my eyes closed, and he was asking me, can you see the light? And I could, but it was actually the light coming through, because it was daybreak by this time. Bearing in mind, this had gone through the whole evening. And it was daybreak coming through my eyes, but I didn't have the heart to tell him that it wasn't what he thought it was. It was just the light coming through. I mean, yeah, it was one of the most surreal sober experiences I think I have ever had in my life, anyway.
And it was just the two of you?
Yeah, his wife was in the back room, and was there to support him if he needed anything. They were both in the program. But yeah, it was really, really, really surreal. And when I said, look, I need to ring home, I want to ring the kids, say goodnight and things like that. And it was a real struggle. I did in the end, because I just did it. But it was a real struggle, and just these rules. And I thought, that's just weird. And I really don't know where about the washing the hands thing. That just totally threw me. Shoes off, that was it. Yeah, you had to have your shoes off. That was the fourth one. Yeah, but again, that aside, it's a crazy story. I mean, it's I've just skipped over it there, really. But yeah, it was a it was a surreal experience, to say the least. Yeah, but again, I can't reiterate how much I feel for the guy. Anyway, it was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting. Like, there is obviously some of, I found in my journey doing things that are very similar to some of the practices in the 12 steps, not exactly, but, looking, one thing that you do is, and you really don't have a choice once you've stopped drinking, is to get to know yourself, right? Like, it just kind of happens.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
The inventory, I guess, would be the translation in the 12 steps, but just understanding who you are. I think that, there's really, if you were going to dumb it down and simplify it completely, there's almost two different ways you can come at this. And one is to, especially if you're drinking, to self-medicate. There's certainly people who are not drinking to self-medicate, and their journey is a bit different, but most of us are to some degree. And you can heal the stuff that you're medicating away from first, and then try to find your way out of alcohol. Or you can stop drinking and then do the work, which I think is what the 12 steps intend, healing the things that you are medicating away in the first place. And I think self-discovery is always a good thing, but I do personally like it to be on my own terms a bit more, which I've really enjoyed. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
Yeah,
It's
I think
really
that's
cool.
what I did, because I definitely took bits from everywhere, to be honest, from from AA, from my own experiences, from your book, from other books, and you just, I don't know, I just had to do it my own way, and take the bits. But I always say that we're like an iceberg, aren't we? And there's 10% that shines above the surface, and it all looks glistening, and yay, we're all great, we're happy, we look nice on the top. But that part that's underneath is the real, the crux of it, where that has the effect on the top. So the top part is just the drinking. That 10%, everything that's underneath is all the emotions and everything, and the circumstances that you've been through that lead you to do that. Whether that be lifestyle, whether it be abusive past or whatever, there's always a reason there, generally, like you say. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the most fascinating things I've found is that emotional turmoil that you're trying to numb or run away from really becomes like a friend or an ally or a guide into finding out, what is wrong, if wrong is the right word, but what is misaligned, I guess, in your life that you want to heal and, live in a different way, so often. And I think one of the most painful parts of being stuck is this inner conflict of having, both wanting to do more of something, more drinking and less drinking at the same time, and then beating yourself up
Yeah.
for your decisions and stuff. But I think a lot of that comes from that we're drinking in the first place to kind of put a damper on or to numb this inner voice that's saying, hey, there's something here. I need to be listened to. I need to, you're not living in a way that is 100%. Even in your story, when you were traveling all the time and away from your family and stuff, and like there was this inner voice saying, hey, this isn't right. This isn't what your best
Yeah.
and highest purpose here, or your, what really is for you, and like this wisdom just inside yourself. And
Yeah.
then drinking, of course, just numbs that away.
And it's I don't know if you can see it behind me. This.
Oh yeah.
Can you read that at all?
You
know when you go for your eyes tested?
Yeah.
And you get one of these, and it says you can rarely see what's right in front of your nose.
Oh, nice.
And for me, I'll tell you why I've got that shortly. But for me, the traveling and looking for this different lifestyle and money and all that kind of stuff, that wasn't what it was all about, and it took a whole load of like I mentioned before, incidents, events, and all this kind of thing to realize what it was I was looking for all along, and that was contentment. And that is what I'd already got, but I'd stepped outside of that looking for everything else, for the career and everything, and the drinking and the and it was just right in my face. And that there, it come from a lady called Jill Cowley, who is an NLP practitioner, and she's got all the t-shirts when it comes to counselling and things like that. Can you hear that? That's my sausage dog just going crazy. I've got a mini dachshund, and my wife's just through there. He's just come in. But anyway, Jill is the lady that I did NLP with, and I walked into her office room one day, and I saw it straight away, and I said, "That's amazing." So that's just got me all over it. And she gave me it as a gift that day. She says, "You can have it." She said, "Nobody's ever noticed that before, and it sums me up." So I've got it in my office now. I just keep it there, and it reminds me, yeah. Another little sweet story there for you. Sorry, I digress.
That's awesome. I like that. So I wanted to get into NLP a bit. So you've now written a book, Finding Your Sober Bubble, and it really is at its core about NLP. So can you talk a little bit about what NLP is and how it helped you?
Yeah, pretty much NLP, it helped me not just with the drinking, but with the emotional aspect and dealing with events and pasts and the guilt and all that kind of thing. And what NLP is, neuro-linguistic programming. I'm not a practitioner, of course. I've been through it, but what it does, it generally reprograms, if that's the right term. It reprograms your thoughts and the way that you see things. We call it regaming. So it takes certain views and the way that you look at the world, and it kind of helps you to reframe that in your mind, so that the way that you see alcohol, for example, which is, it's always going to be in it, but the way that you see that, it needs to be changed, and NLP helps you to change that and see it for what it is and not what you think it is. And in addition to that, it's something that it's just a life skill. It's all self-talk, which comes into other therapies, CBT and all these things. But self-talk, again, is so important, because how many times have you spoke to somebody who drinks and they hate themselves, and they've done this or they've done that, when if they just had a little bit more positivity and encouragement and self-love that self-talk can give you, then it's a different game. And NLP really does help with that and give you a more positive outlook. Jill, who I did mine with, if anybody's going to go and see a practitioner, I'm not going to say you've got to go and see Jill. That'd be silly, especially if you're in the US. Why would you? But you've certainly got to have a rapport, an understanding, and and go into it believing that it's going to work. And that rapport thing, as soon as I walked in there, I was supposed to be in there for an hour session, introduction, and look through contracts and things, and I walked out 2 hours later. I felt like I'd been emotionally beaten up, but I walked out there 2 hours later, because it was just, and it was a real good journey for me, and that's why I've included it in the book, and speak of it so highly.
That's so cool. I did not know much, if anything, about NLP, and then people who read This Naked Mind were very much like, wow, you've really used NLP here. It's like, I did. That's interesting. That's not intentional, but understand it.
It's like it's with anything. If you're going into something and you want it to work, then you've got to put your trust in it. And it's the same with any of them. It's the same with whether it's a job interview, whether it's AA, whether it's whatever. And I put my trust in it, and it certainly changed my approach and outlook. I started that in 2017, and first of all, it helped me overcome the emotions of the death of my mum and things like that. And then with NLP, along with the other aspects of quitting alcohol with AA and reading books and researching myself and things like that, it all come together. And that's why, like you and I, we did it our own ways, and you draw on everything that you've got around you and your experiences. But it's certainly at the forefront of everything NLP for me. Excuse me.
That's so cool. So, well, Darren, this has been awesome, and I've really enjoyed it. So where can people find you, should they want to reach out and read your book and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I've got a website called The Uni of Everyday Life, which is www.theunioflife.com. And on there, I write various blogs, whether it's about cutting out drinking or health or whatever takes my fancy, really. And on there you can find information about my book. The book, Finding Your Sober Bubble, is on Amazon. which is something that I've self-published. So that's that's on there. And I'm on Instagram as the Sober Bubble. So if anybody wants to hook up with me on there, whether it's for a chat, advice, or I can get some off other people as well. I find these platforms are great for support, certainly. So I've got a journal as well that I've just written, which I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. You can get it; it's on the website, but it's a new thing that I put together to record anxieties and things like that. So yeah.
That's
good.
That's so cool. So let me ask you the question that I always ask sort of at the end, which is if you could go back to Darren of, waking up in Vienna and not really knowing where he was and traveling and, the instance after the 3 months sober where you just really were in a bad spot and tell him about what life is like now, what would you tell him?
Well, first of all, I'd give him a slap. I think that would be in order. Wake up, boy. But I would certainly tell him that, there's a whole new world out there. Absolute. It's clean. You wake up fresh and you're missing so much of your life. The big things, they're not really the big things. The little things that you look back on are the big things. And I think that is definitely something that I would tell him. And I would say, look, contentment is where you find it. It's not where you look for it, and it's usually within. That would be. That's the first thing that pops to mind. I'd probably tell him quite a lot more as well, but that's it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been really struck by that same thing in my life of when you stripped all the things I was chasing away and started just being present in my own life and authentically present in my own life.
Yeah.
It really is amazing how everything you're looking for just is right here. There's a statistic that says, and I don't know if this was done through studies or surveys or how it was come about, but basically the idea is that 90% of our happiness comes from what's going on inside of us, and only 10% comes from what's going on outside of us. But we've been fed such a lie that we just have to get this circumstance right in order to really be happy. And so we chase all sorts of stuff and continuously. When if you strip that away and say, right, I'm just gonna see what it is without anything. I'm just gonna be here. It is just like what is right behind your shoulder,
it's great. I love it. It is. So true. And you're a lot calmer as well. Yes, absolutely. I'll just tell you this before I go. When I was doing my audiobook, I was doing it outside in a summer house that I've got. So I narrated it myself, and the amount of interruptions that I got off my kids, and the amount of times that I was just like, I'll come back to it and things like that. If I'd have been drinking and doing something like that, I'd have gone nuts. It would have just been, I don't know, crazy. And I think that because you're so content, you deal with things much better. And I think that's another thing. I'm a hell of a lot calmer now. Definitely. Absolutely, me too. It's uncanny how different it is, but it isn't linear. It's kind of like you look back and you're like, wow, it isn't like a switch. It's much more like a slowly over time. Yeah, it is. Things. Yeah. It's one of them, isn't it? Going up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Darren. It's been really fun, and I really appreciate your time. No, thank you very much. I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Okay, honesty day. Let me ask you, did the pandemic change your relationship with alcohol? Maybe you started drinking more than usual. Maybe you started using it as a way to cope with isolation or stress. The truth is, a lot of people did. You're not alone. Are you ready now to take back control of your drinking in a post-pandemic world and still be able to enjoy life as things reopen? The answer is not restriction, it's not deprivation. You can break your pandemic patterns and habits and finally feel liberated from alcohol. As we begin to emerge from a very challenging 15 months, and as you return to normal, you can return to a life where alcohol becomes small and irrelevant for you, a total non-issue. Take the first step and join us for this very special and completely free 5-day virtual event. It's from June 14th through 18th. Every day, we'll be teaching you exactly how to get back in control of your drinking post-pandemic. Save your spot by June 13th at controlalcohollive.com. Again, that's controlalcohollive.com. I can't wait to see you there. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.